topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Eat and Critique Show with restaurant critics Steve-O and Sophia. Brought to you by one of Steve-O and Sophia's favorite Incontro Italian cuisine and steakhouse located on the Walk in Coral Springs. Now, sit back while award-winning restaurant critics Steve-O and Sophia share with you the good, the bad, and the ugly in South Florida dining.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Eat and Critique with the invisible Steve-O.
I'm here.
And our guest, LeBeau, tonight. We thought we'd do something a little different tonight. Usually we give the perspective of the diners and our complaints of what we expect, what we don't expect, what we like, what we don't like. And we thought tonight could be different by having an actual employee of a restaurant give his view of what he expects from diners, and maybe some funny stories and not so funny stories, because we sure have had some. Remember, Steve?
We have. Hey, before we start, first of all, I want, and don't hold this against us, we have got a huge show on the 17th at 5 o'clock Eastern time. It's our MAGA show. It's the MAGA train. And we are going to be talking about everything that's going on with the elections coming up. It is going to be probably one of our biggest shows of the year. So 5 o'clock Eastern time this Thursday, and it is going to be crazy. And the other thing is, we're also going to be talking tonight about new Palm Beach restaurants.
We sure are. And maybe even where LeBeau currently works, but I won't be able to ever see him ever because it's too high cost for me. But welcome, LeBeau.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We know you're busy.
Tell us about your background.
As far as food and beverage goes, this is my chosen career. I've been doing this since the early 90s, when I was around 19 years old. I've been in South Florida for 17 years now.
Wow.
And yeah.
I've known you 17 years.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
As a regular of mine for many years.
He's the best.
What are some of the restaurants you've worked at?
In South Florida, I've worked at. I'm going to leave my current employer out, but I'll talk about the other restaurants I've worked at. I've worked at. I spent most of the time I worked in South Florida working at the City Cellar.
Okay.
Downtown West Palm Beach. I was there for 14 years. I was the trainer, so I hand trained all the servers that came through there for all that time. And then I left there for the pandemic, and I worked briefly at Viva La Playa. And Viva La Playa is by the people who did Benny's on the beach.
Okay.
Basically, like right down the walkway from the pier, and it was a pan South American cuisine restaurant run by a celebrity chef.
The one on the corner, right?
Exactly. Yes. And I opened the place and stayed there until my current job came knocking.
I didn't know, because we actually went there one time. I had no idea you were there. I never got to see you.
I had got to ask this question. I'm real political. Sophia, not so. What do you think, or better yet, what are servers saying about the possibility of no more taxes on tips?
I'm also very political.
Yeah.
I discussed that ahead of time, and I'm pretty much on the part of the spectrum for you guys. But as far as that goes, I think it kind of all what the degree of politics are. I think a lot of us think it's kind of silly, honestly.
That's no, be honest. It's good because I want to know what the servers, people who get tips, because we don't ever hear from
The
them.
dirty secret is that
You don't really report them
right,
anyway.
servers are already undertaxed.
Even if it goes on a credit card.
Servers are undertaxed.
Okay.
Even if it goes on a credit card, you have to understand the IRS is not going through credit card receipts.
Right.
Okay.
For the majority of my career, there's been a formula, depending on the kind of restaurant you work at, where basically you might declare, say 10% of what you sold.
Okay.
The idea being that you're at 15%, you tipped out, and then that was what you had left. Generally speaking, servers make more than that. Some servers are more honest than others with the government. Some servers are more scared of the government than others, but it's just the case because when I first got into the industry, the IRS, and I'm going to remember the details of this poorly, but when I first got into the early 90s, the IRS did a deal with restaurants saying we will do these certain things if you do these certain things to make sure that servers are doing all their tips. And the IRS got burned in a court case. They were somehow it was overturned in court. This is decided to be unconstitutional or illegal or whatever.
Wow.
So they've
Okay.
kind of been hands off with the restaurant industry. So yeah, that's
So now, why did they think? I would think that they would be excited about that if it can even happen, because it's not the president who decides that; it's
Right.
Congress.
first of all, you have to understand that in large part of the industry, I work somewhere now where gratuity is automatically included on the bill, and that goes, straight to your servers. But in large part of the industry, it's based on your tipping is based on goodwill, on people liking servers. And like if you're thinking to yourself, I go to work every day, I put my hours in, I gotta pay taxes. So this guy wants me to reach in my pocket for an extra dollar.
I see where
You
you're
gotta pay
going.
taxes. You don't want to create a situation where you're creating animosity between your industry and the world at large.
Right. I understand.
And furthermore, we suspect that, it's probably a backdoor for other people who aren't, working at your local, whatever, diner at the corner.
Right.
Like, probably there's going to be ways that this tax loopholes will be used so that suddenly, contract employees somewhere are suddenly not paying taxes.
Okay. That makes sense. See, 'cause I never heard from. We haven't heard from the restaurants. We've heard from the politicians. I don't even know if that can even happen. I mean, it sounds good.
I only know that I didn't like it because I work my butt off and I have to declare every single
100%.
penny.
I feel you there. That's what I'm saying. That's the kind of
know.
psychology that
And you know
happens.
what? And Sophie and I talk about this all the time. I feel so bad with the way the economy is right now because people don't understand the restaurant business is a tough business. Long hours, not the greatest pay in the world, especially for the hours you actually work. And people who start restaurants put everything into that. And now more and more we're seeing restaurants go under. And it's really sad.
I think it's cyclical. I mean, when I was starting out, they would always tell you that 50% of restaurants don't make it past the first 3 years, something like that. And it's like, I mean, that's like this kind of the way it goes. If you start a restaurant and you generate income enough to pay your family's bills for 5 years,
Right.
and then you got to do something else. Like, there's lots of industries. That's what entrepreneurship is like.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's what it is. One of the things that's very interesting about the restaurant industry is
Mine is more, it's sad though.
right.
Restaurants been in business 20, 30 years.
Yeah, when you see
And-
a pillar of the community disappear, that's definitely I think that's what happens sooner or later. I mean, like, part of the thing about restaurant business is if you're not dealing with something that's super duper corporate, if you're dealing with the pillar of the community, it's small business. The person who owns the business is the king. Like, they make all the decisions and no one really else has any say to it. And their decisions are kind of what made that restaurant happen. How long are they going to live? And when they sell it to somebody or they give it to their kid or whatever, is it going to be the same thing?
Right.
Can it be the same thing?
You're right.
You know what I mean? Unless you raise your kids and there was a time when you raised your kids in that thing where it's like, oh, I was born a restaurant owner, so that's just what I'm going to do. But we don't really have that culture as much anymore. You know what I mean? So
I just know I saw a restaurant that just blew my mind, BurgerFi. I mean, they're huge. They're franchise. Most ones here are locally owned.
yeah, I didn't know that.
But
Bankruptcy.
but didn't they sell to
Well,
someone else?
they sold it to
Private equity.
the
Right.
guy who owns
Mhm.
what's the pizza place?
Domino's?
Coal Fire.
Oh, Coal Fire.
What's the name?
Coal Fire. The
Anthony's.
Anthony's Coal Fire.
They bought them out.
Right.
And this, you know what? I'm sure the guy made a lot of money. I don't feel sorry for him, but I mean, BurgerFi is. I mean, there's probably at least 50 or 60 in the area, and they made a good product. A little expensive. I thought it was a little high, but nowadays everything people don't even understand. Just stop.
That's part of it. It's just like those parts of the market that are getting hit. I mean, like we're now seeing it with McDonald's, but you know, when inflation was going on, like the idea that I'm going to get something, you know, 50% better than McDonald's for twice the cost,
Right.
is that still a reasonable price? You know,
Oh, they have.
you know what I mean?
People don't understand how things have gone up. I mean, people said about, I mean, they don't even, when those trucks deliver to the restaurant, guess how much they're paying in gas? You don't even think about those kind of things. So they have to raise their rates and all.
I want to go back to that. I want to bring two things together. I mean, this is more less dirty stories and more like the politics behind the restaurant, the economics behind the restaurant. But going back to the taxation thing, you know, this is another place where it's like it just doesn't seem fair to me because when inflation goes up, I make more money. I don't have to go to my boss and ask for a raise ever. When the prices go up,
Exactly.
unless it drives down business, which it rarely ever does, I make more money. Like people have this idea about the restaurant business and the servers always mean like, yes, if you're starting off in this business, you're going to get abused, you're going to work for owners who hate you, you're going to be selling, you know, very inexpensive items for people who may not tip as well. But you know, if you decide this is your career, this is your industry, this is your craft, you know what I mean? That certifications for wine, for tequila. And I remember the Wine Educators Society. Now, if you decide that this is your path, it doesn't really suck. You can raise your family and pay your mortgage on 30 hours a week. You know what I mean?
Set or people supposedly figure out their tips based on the bill,
Exactly.
and bills are higher.
Exactly.
Is there a demographics in tipping? Is the older demographics, for example, I'm going to use Boca. Boca is an older market, and a friend of mine owned a restaurant in Boca. Boy, I got to tell you, people there are very particular, and they'll finish their meal and send it back and say it wasn't good and expect he's smiling.
We've seen that.
Specifically,
happen.
Boca Raton is notorious for that. Specifically that city, not that area, Palm Beach, not, you know, like that particular town. It's I've never worked in Boca. I've never worked in Boca.
Demographics to tipping? Do older people, because maybe some of them are on a fixed income,
Older
don't?
people tip more reliably. You know what I mean? Like you rarely are going to get, if the standard of your restaurant is 20%, you're rarely going to get under 20% from older people.
Okay.
But quite often the crazy tip is going to come from younger people who you made a connection with, who, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And the Europeans are the worst tippers.
They're getting better. There's lots of ideas and lots of stereotypes that go into tipping that come from the culture that it comes from. You know, when I got into this in the 90s, I think I was in the business for 7 years before I was ever a server in a restaurant. This is back in the Midwest before I moved to Florida, where I was not the only Black server on the floor the whole time I worked there. I worked in the business for 7 years before that happened. And in, you know, the segregated times, restaurant culture is different in the Black community. You know, tipping wasn't so much of a thing. So Black people have this horrible, you know, reputation for like being bad tippers, and it carries over today. Even though it's really, I don't think there's any kind of like difference in demographic today. But like, and so Black people get worse service on top of it because they expected that they don't know how to tip. Like literally, not tip is not part of the culture, and then that means that when the Black person comes to the door, you know, the server who serves them is less motivated, or maybe it gets pawned off to the new server. It's called profiling your tables. It's a very common thing. You got to fight against people. Yeah, people profile the tables.
I'm so glad
And,
you came up with this idea.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. It's the thing. And so it's the same thing with Europeans. Europeans
But we know.
often were educated before coming to the United States. So we tip here, and it's not like a little something extra. It is the payment method. And once again, let's put back another layer. There are many ways in which the system is designed to kind of, unlike other industries, some people call servers and bartenders the aristocrats of the restaurant, of the working class, because in many ways, the way the system is set up, things that benefit us benefit the boss and vice versa. Once again, for me, getting a raise is never a question of me going to my boss and saying, I need more money per hour. I know what I make per hour is going to be, and there's a thing called the tip credit. The tip credit is half of the U.S. minimum wage, and basically, for minimum wage for calculating purposes, my boss is allowed to pay me that much less per hour than minimum wage, as long as my tips make up for it to at least minimum wage. So I never go to my boss saying, I'm like, five. Well, I don't even know what I make per hour these days, because it's so small a part of my income.
Right.
And so
why do they want to? And they were talking about in Las Vegas, which is a huge service industry. Why do they want to raise hourly wages when you really make most of your money in tips?
So once again, there's, I'm at the high end. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Right.
I work for a celebrity chef and sell $100 steaks, whatever. The bottom end, because a lot of those jobs don't come with benefits, because you're still working for a small business or things like that. That can be the difference. I'm into politics, and this is one place where I break with the people that I usually go with. I am not really rooting for servers to be paid minimum wage, because for me and all the servers I know, and for most of my career, even when I was a little younger, like, I could make as much as the guy working in the factory, working less hours, and not having to fight with my boss or all the time to get more money. What really interesting aspect of this is the interests are so aligned that servers will often help their employers commit wage theft. There are a lot of restaurants that just won't pay overtime, ever. So if I got this really busy week coming up and I know there's a bunch of people in town spending money or whatever, I might want to work more than 40 hours. And I don't care about that $5 an hour that my boss pays myself. If my boss says, hey, I can let you work, but you can't clock in, and there's a time in my life, now I'm more, about what I'm about in false profiles. But there's a time where I'm like, I want that Saturday night, the last day of the week.
Yeah.
I want to make that money, and if I can only make that money by not clocking in and you not having to pay me for those hours, it's worth it for me. And that's crazy, Like,
what's the biggest tip you've ever received? Now, you work at a lot of fine restaurants.
The biggest tip I've ever received in a regular situation. Now that's a tough call, because, like, once again, I work now at a high-end steakhouse where gratuities included.
Well, you can get a table of 16 people.
Right. But before that, I would probably say when I worked at Opus One in Detroit, every year before the auto show, all the VPs from
all the car manufacturers
from Ford would bring out the whole restaurant, and I got a $12.50 tip from a table, $1,250.
One table?
Yeah, 6 people. Yeah,
6 people.
Sweet.
But then there's another crazy where I had here's one that's even crazier to me, and it's a smaller number, but I had this family. They had a private dining room, and they were celebrating grandma's birthday. 10 people. They had a minimum to have the whole room. All right. So at the end of the meal, they paid me. The tip came out to $90 per person. The gratuity that's included. $90 per person at the table for the 10 people that are there, and they threw another $500 on top of it. After they already been jacked for more than 20% because it's a contract, they threw an extra $500. That kind of stuff. And it's grandma's birthday. You know what I mean? Of course, these are people who live in South Florida. You have your bag of thing going on. The kind of money that can slosh around here in South Florida. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So another thing you and I have talked about, I'm sure you're going to straighten me out. So first of all, Sophie and I, because we understand the restaurant business, are good tippers.
And LeBeau knows.
I know this absolutely. Sophia's incredible.
But I don't like being told what I have to tip. And because that means no matter if they're good or bad, I still got to tip them. So a big thing with me is I don't want to have to keep asking for water. I love a server that I don't even have to. Well, yeah, I'm sure.
That's I mean, like, listen, that's, you know, there's been places where we agree that that's just the basics.
But I don't care about the bathroom. They
Right.
put my
water-
napkin.
no,
I don't care about that.
water's number one myth. There are people, you know, there's gonna be times when, like, you fill the guy's water and he drinks it, and you fill it and he drinks it, and you fill it and he leaves it for a second. You put the thing down, go to another table, and you look over and he's drinking again. That's, you know, that's gonna happen. But at the same time, then from then on,
But why is that? That upsets me that I can't pay more. Well, I guess I could, but I can't pay less if the service was bad.
Once again, that goes to benefit the restaurant. I work for. So I told you about the tip, you know,
Right.
credit. If the gratuity is written on the every time for every table, the server is no longer a tipped employee. So it's not the tip credit. They're now a commissioned employee. They can be paid something like $3 an hour by the employer, and they don't receive overtime. They, you know, like if you clock in for
No benefits.
overtime. It depends on the employer.
Oh, there
It
are.
depends on the employer. Like this is the first time I've ever worked on this contract we're talking about now, and my employer has incredible benefits. You know, so I got lucky. But it's to the benefit of the employer that as long as the server, with all the money that is in there, makes twice minimum wage, because they're now it's now commission instead of a tip.
Right.
That's basically what that is. That's a commission. That's you paying a commission for that service. In a restaurant like mine, or honestly anywhere I feel like where they're doing that, complain about service, there's usually going to be some kind of monetary, you know what I mean? Like if it's going to be investigated, if it, you know, like if I realize I'm going to keep the water, I'm going to my boss, I need to buy this guy X, Y, or Z.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Because that's just a level of standard. I mean, like, you know, at the end of the day, like, you're paying my bills. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if I'm a hospitality professional, which I strive to be, unless it gets to the right point of downright abuse, it is what it is. You got to realize I'm dealing with people who maybe low blood sugar, maybe being a total jerk because you can't help it, and you can't do anything about it until you get food in you.
Right.
And this is the night we're getting crushed, and your food's not coming, and you're freaking out about it. I can make an enemy out of you.
I didn't even think of it. My father was like, yeah.
I can make an enemy out of you. But, you know, one of the things that you learn when you've been in this business for a while is you got your guests are going to come in, and everything's going to go great, and they're going to leave, and they're going to be happy to get good service. If your guests are going to come in, there's going to be a problem. And if you fix that problem properly, that guest is dedicated to you for life. They're going to remember your name. They're going to come back and ask for you. They're going to tip you more forever. You know, that's the way you build those guests, is fixing those problems. Or, you know, situation like that with your dad. He probably realizes at the end of his meal, like, man, I treated that person like crap. You know what I mean? Like after a couple of times, probably realizes, like, man, that person didn't do it. But, you know, that's my actual job. My actual job is to take that garbage with a smile on my face and give you good service and collect the money.
And how many times a night do you bite your tongue?
Depends on night, depends on the guest, you know.
Okay, I got to ask this one. How do you, let's just say you have a table of 8. How in the world do you take everyone's order and not write it down?
I don't do that. There are people who do that, and it's like
How do they do
it's like a
that?
party trick. But if you work at a restaurant where I have any say in the matter, you're not allowed to do that. In my restaurant, if I see somebody, I'm the head server, if I see someone taking an order without writing it down, then we're gonna have a discussion because it is what it is. If something goes wrong, we have no way of like backing it up.
Right, that's
You know
true.
what I mean? And if it does go wrong, then the guest tables are thinking, like, he didn't bother to write it down. Like, how, you know, what we want to expect.
But that does happen. I've seen
That's happened. It's like I used to do when I was younger, you know, like wasn't being in my career. It's like a party trick. And it's really, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like every item in the menu is just like a box. How can I explain it? You know, it's like doing taxes. During the pandemic, I worked for an accountant and helped her prepare taxes for a year. And like when I first started working there, it's like, how do you even know what these words you're talking about mean? You know what I mean? How do you know what page this thing is on? But now someone, you know, client calls and says, oh, I forgot that I've got this extra income. I know like what page to go to, you know, and it's just like that. You know, you learn your menu, and you just know it so well that it's just
Right.
like, you know, here, you know.
I have a question. So how do they tip the other people?
Generally,
Because
it's gonna be-
doesn't it come out of
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
tip?
Generally, it's going to be either, it depends on the relationship, you know, in the house. It's going to be either a percentage of your sales. So I sell a certain amount of money. And this is why a lot of places servers get mad if you under tip, because it's like, and you spend $100 and you don't tip me anything. I still gotta give my
Mhm.
busters $5. You know,
That's my
like-
question. That was
Are
my
there people who
And the
do that?
bartender-
No, I can't remember the last time that I saw someone get a 0 tip. It's not a thing. You know what I mean?
You have to tip the bartender too, right? If there's like wine or.
It may be that you tip the bartender a smaller percentage than you tip your busters of your total sales, or some places just actually separate liquor sales and tip out less. Generally speaking, it's going to be the whole sales, because it's like, whether you sell a drink or not, the bartender should set the bar and be ready for you to make those drinks for you. You know what I mean? So you can pay them for their work.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but Sophia and I have noticed, the show's been going for 12 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. One of the things is, if you had a problem with your food or the service, used to be, many of the restaurants would discount your tab. Some of them would just take it off your tab. I don't see that now. It's
I
more like,
do.
yeah, I'm sorry, you know.
Since I've been in Florida, every restaurant that I've worked at, that's originally empowered to tell the boss, like, you know, we got to buy this, we got to hear this, or whatever. You know, I mean,
But it
I
used to be that way. It used to be, oh, you know,
once
take care of your bills.
Once again, my experience is going to disagree with that, because when I was coming up, you know, as I'm younger, I'm working at these, like, you know, lower margin restaurants where they don't have enough money to give the stuff away. You know what I mean? So I worked at a lot of restaurants. I remember I used to work at this downtown Detroit. I used to work at this very popular, it was an area called Greektown. And it was all Greek restaurants, and they had one New Orleans restaurant down there. And I worked there as a bartender. And it got so bad that I was a bartender, so I didn't deal with as much, but like the servers, when they had specific language when they would do what's called the entree check, your food comes in. I come there and see if you're happy with your food, and then I leave. I come back in like 2 minutes and make sure that you're enjoying your food. And they had to like change the verbiage to make it harder for a guest to complain about the food, because they weren't going to take it off the bill, because that's just how they did business. And that was in the early odds.
Remember the one time though that I can't remember, it was a sports bar, I'm not going to use the name, but a big sports bar, and they're very well known here in Palm Beach.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And they did the order wrong 3 times. Remember? They brought out the wrong,
Oh, yeah,
wrong
yeah.
thing, and then they brought out the right thing but cooked the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then they brought it out completely different from what the order was. And I just said, forget it. I'm not hungry anymore to worry about it. And they still didn't take it off, remember?
I remember that.
Yeah, it's like shocked by that.
That's messed up. There's a small possibility that the server just forgot to take it off, which just happened. There's times where I'll say, I'm going to buy this guest something. I'll tell my boss, I'm going to buy this guest something, whatever. I just forget to take it off the bill. As soon as it's pointed out to me or whatever, you know, and if it's in a situation where I have controlled the method and you're gone, I will take it off after you've left, and, you know, and fix it in that situation. But, you know, once it's the levels of hospitality, it's the, you know what I mean? It's every place is a different philosophy. And I actually went back to one thing. I did put one funny story in my back pocket.
I want to hear. I was going to ask you for one.
You asked about biting, hop in the neck, you bite your tongue.
And you knew everybody.
No, this is not for everybody. I'm not gonna trick my guests. My guests are amazing people. They pay my bills, and I love them for it. Period. Every single one of them. If I haven't forced you out without taking your money or called the cops on you or called security on you, then I love you as my guest. Period. You know what I mean?
Have you
Next time you
called
show up,
somebody?
you get any places with alcohol, you're gonna have to deal with that. And next time you see it, I'm gonna smile and give you excellent service. But
Boy.
if you've been with a restaurant for a while
Mhm.
and you have a good reputation, you do your job well, whatever, every server gets one FU every job. I discovered this because I was working at this restaurant once again downtown Detroit, and with this great server Stephanie that I work with. And one day my manager comes to me and says, "Hey, I need you to look at this table for Stephanie because they said she called an a-hole." I'm like, "What?" Like, obviously Stephanie didn't do that, you know. It's fine, everything's great, whatever. That restaurant shuts down. I go somewhere else, and Stephanie's found me there. And like 2 years later, the manager comes to me and it's like,
She called someone else.
exactly. It's like, oh, you can do that every restaurant one time because you're just like, I would never do that. You know, I would never do that. And you don't ever do it again. You know what I mean? But that's your dude. You got to keep it in your back pocket, like if you really, really, really want to use it. You know?
That is funny.
You know, it's amazing doing a show like this today. All these things going through my head because we're not going to question a server when we go for a tasting. So you've got a lot of experience. And you normally, when you change, you normally go to the general manager
What do you
for
mean?
your interview or the owner?
Usually you deal with the manager. I think for like once again, like a lot of people don't think this is a career, but you treat it as a career. Like my last 2 jobs, the job I have right now, and then the one I told you about the chef on the beach, I was not looking for a job. They came and found me.
Oh,
Like I'm sitting at home and I got a phone call. It's like, can you please come to this interview? I'm looking for people, blah, 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 blah. You know, because I've been in the career long enough. You know, there are people out there. Once again, because I chose this as my career. There are people right now, you know, the 15 years I was training at City Solar, some of those people are general managers at other places because they wanted to go to that side. You know what I mean? It's like this guy taught me how to wait tables, or this guy elevated me from, you know, working at Cheesecake Factory to working at something that's a little more elevated. I watched him train servers around me for, you know, I want that guy. And they come and
so they don't like give you a test on what would you do?
LeBeau's a legend.
I'm not a legend. It's just I think, you know, I'm like I'm like I said, who you know, especially coming from the 90s, and I'm from the north, it's a little different. Hospitality is a little more respect here in the south. But the north is like, you know, that was like a black state. Like I was a black because I was the waiter. A lot of people won't stay in this business for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like where are you gonna find a server with 30 years experience?
Right. I don't even call them waiters anymore.
He really is a legend, though. He's the best.
This is so amazing because, you know, we usually are talking somebody in the front of the house, and we get a lot of chefs on our show.
We do get a lot of chefs.
And
We had the chef for the White House on.
Oh, nice.
The Clintons and
Nice.
Obama and the
Very
Bushes.
cool.
That was cool.
I was in Detroit Free Press.
Very cool. That's my hometown. My best friend used to deliver that paper when we were like 8
Oh,
or 9 years old.
so they called me up to do some consulting for them. Yeah, no problem. I get there, the newspaper was on strike.
Oh, this was during the like back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. That
Oh,
was a
big
big
They
deal.
didn't tell me that. So, first of all, I saw the size of the paper because it's a union town. And a lot of
Absolutely.
people respect the union.
My family stopped getting the news and the free press
Yeah.
when that went
So
on for
their
years.
newspaper went down. There was no ads in there. I was selling advertising.
Oh,
Well, the first thing was they said, we're going to have to drive you in from the hotel.
yeah, there's a lot of violence going on.
People were throwing rocks,
Yeah,
stab.
it was a big deal.
Oh my God. And I'm calling people up for the whole, I was there for a week trying to say, you would not believe people say, well, show how the great salesperson you are, you got to be able to do this. Hey, listening to people in Detroit, and you're here representing the Detroit News and Free Press, and we're on strike? What are you, crazy? That I'll never forget that. Oh my God, it was so bad. Getting back to restaurants, what determines you liking where you're at? And the money's important, but you are going to make money wherever you go.
Once again, I've been in this business for 30 years. So one of the things that I'm discovering that is very important to me is autonomy.
Okay.
And the thing is, you can't give autonomy to everybody. You know what I mean? But like you know, I'm
Yeah, but to
I'm
get
the so-called-
somebody like
I'm the so-called captain, so I have a fair amount of autonomy. You know, like I, you know, send my boss home, and they're not the front of the house manager because the boss doesn't can trust me. I, once again, 30 years in the business is a good chance that I've worked in this industry or maybe even in this restaurant longer than my direct boss or anyone up my chain of command. So that's kind of important to me.
It always amazes me. The general manager, and 6 years later, you thought they were really good. They're not even there anymore, and some of them aren't even in the business anymore.
Another one for me is going to be a product that I can stand behind. Obviously, I don't, you know, I mean, I'm willing to sell slop, you know, if it's cheap enough. I'm not trying to gouge people. I'm not trying to. I am also not an aggressive salesman. You know, this is like I always tell if I'm, you know, in times when I was doing things like that I'm a server, but common strength, common weaknesses. A lot of restaurants consider hard sell to be the most important characteristic to have in a server. Now, I can thrive in those environments by just saying, like, look, what you're going to get from me in the level of hospitality and the level of making your servers around you better and things like that is going to feel back from the fact that I don't push as hard, you know, to squeeze out that last buck from that guest, because especially the restaurant like
bothered me,
especially a restaurant like mine, like it's expensive.
Yeah.
You know, like, I got to recognize that you may sit up for months for this meal. You know what I mean?
Right? Yes.
Like I'm not trying to create a confrontational situation where you feel like I'm trying to reach into your pocket. And of course, there's, you know, with hard salesmanship, there's ways to, but at the same time, it's like I am willing to engage in concept. You know, one of the things that people are often shocked by is, you know, if I see that we're having an issue, I would say specifically, like, are you on a budget? Because if you are, I can definitely work with you. What is it that you were able to spend? We'll work together and make that happen. I'll make sure we don't go over, we're going over everything. Like, I'm willing to have those discussions with my guests because I consider that to be part of hospitality. At the end of the meal, when they come to you, they're going to want the money. You're going to have to pay me. And I don't, you know, the great part of my job that always made me feel great inside when I didn't work at a place, you know, where I was a contracted employee, but I was actually a tipped employee, was that people only give me what they want to give me. You know, both my parents are doctors, and I don't make as much money as a doctor, but like people pay their doctor bill and they're mad. They're not mad at their doctor.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to pay that much for it. Like people, I'm not pushing anybody's arm, you know what I mean, to pay me. And that's always like it gives you a good feeling, I guess is what I'm saying.
So, LeBeau, why didn't you ever want to go into management? Because you really are kind of a manager when you're training.
So the best things about management is you get you wear the suit instead of the you know, whatever the uniform is. You're more likely to get better benefits. But generally speaking, managers don't make as much money, and certainly not as much money. Certainly not as much money.
Everybody comes to you.
Certainly not as much money per hour as the top paid servers are going to make.
I kind of thought that. I figured they made less.
But once again, if you're trying to climb a corporate ladder, if you come to, like, you know, little you know, mom and pop restaurant, you become a manager there, and then you move over to, you know, something that's owned by somebody huge like Capital Grill, and you become a manager there, and then a general manager, and a regional manager, and, you know, you move up the corporate ladder. That's what you're into, and that's definitely, you know, that's.
I'm not trying to give you a career change, but you ever think about going into restaurant consulting? Because, you know, we're doing a show over the next couple of weeks, new restaurants in Palm Beach. I mean, you would not think there's a economy problem out there, right?
It's something I've got to consider because I'm getting old. You know, I just turned 50.
Yeah, your knowledge.
Right, no, that's the thing. No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I love my job, but my job, if I break my leg, I'm out of work. You know what I mean? True. And as I get older, like, I'm going to be less capable of doing the things that my job requires. So yeah, you know, something like that.
Then fire rescue, we do restaurant rescue. We go.
Hey, you guys do incredible.
The thing is, like, why would they open another restaurant? Like, there's 1,000 chicken places already, and they're opening more. And then there's so many closing, and then there's hundreds opening. They're not going to all make it, and I don't understand.
Number one, you think it's not. Me, that's not going to make it. That guy's not going to make it. Number two, you know, you got to worry about the lag. You say there's 1,000 chicken restaurants. And let me know if we're getting over in time.
Yeah, no, we're
Oh,
fine.
we
said
have
this is-
time.
You said there's 1,000 chicken restaurants. Well, maybe 5 years ago, there were 200 chicken restaurants. Someone said, you know what, this homeless community needs a chicken restaurant. I'm going to make that happen. I've never worked in a restaurant before. It's going to take me 5 years to get it open. By the time the 5 years comes, now there's 1,000 chicken restaurants.
Right.
Like that's a
That's right.
possibility. You know what I mean? Like there's always the lag in the market. You know what I
Well,
mean?
like the barbecue, there's like 1,000 new barbecue places. And they're
Everyone's barbecue in the neighborhood. You know,
but they're not all that
I
good.
understand, but
The Pig Beach.
You
Oh,
know,
have
and I
you
read a
tried
big
that?
article
Oh, awful.
on Red Lobster. You know, they're under bankruptcy. And the biggest problem they said that's caused it is all the shrimp
Shrimp.
you can eat, which was just once a week.
there's a lot more to that story.
Yeah.
than
It's gotta be.
So that's what
Yeah.
this is something that I hit on earlier, and that's venture capital.
And
They
Right.
bought venture capital, and first of all, one of the partners that owned the venture capital that bought them was their shrimp supplier.
Oh gosh.
So basically, what happens is venture capital buys these restaurants. They let's see, Red Lobster, if I remember correctly, used to own their land, and so the venture capital company bought the land from underneath them and then made them pay rent. Like that's basically what they do. Is these venture capitalists come in and they'll load the company up with all the debt they can
Right.
get and try and get as much rent out of the company as they can, and then it just falls apart because they're not going for long term; they're going for cash,
Wow.
and then they'll sell for parts. You know,
Because they're always packed. I was like, how could they be in
I mean, once again, if suddenly if your boss comes to you and says, sell the land that you own free and clear,
Yes.
and then pay me rent every month,
Right.
you know, among other things.
And TGI Friday, they're almost all closed. I read an article about them that their first restaurant is still open in New York, where they started at, but they're down to one restaurant now here in South Florida.
That one though that surprised me. Do you remember the movie Office Space?
Yes.
Yes.
And they had a parody of Fridays in there. They talked about that where they're like, people don't want that anymore. People
The badges.
yeah, exactly. They're players. Like people want to feel like they're dealing with a person. And some of that stuff is a little humiliating. You know what I mean? People recognize that now. You know what I mean? So I think that, and I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying, oh, poor servers, you know what I mean? They're making money, but I think that people just don't want that anymore. Just like the so-called restaurants closing down. Like, that's just not, you know, what Gen X and Gen Z are like going out to look for. You know, like it's just.
So for a person that wants to go get in a restaurant business, want to be a server, went to culinary school. And in culinary school, if you wanted to be a manager, you had to learn all this also. But for a person who wants to go in the restaurant business, what kind of money are they looking at their first 2 or 3 years?
When it tables, it varies so wildly on where you go. You know what I mean? There's you can go for like expensive restaurants, which require higher level service, which means you're taking fewer tables and getting more money for it. Or you can go for the turn and burn,
Okay.
which is like get them in, get them out. You know,
Right.
I'm going to wait on 100 people tonight, and they're all going to leave me $3. I'm going to walk out here with $300.
Right.
But there's also a lot of, you know, with inflation and everything going right now, it's so crazy. I know for most of my career, there's an old saying in the restaurant business: if I make $100 a night, I'll be happy.
Okay.
That's not it anymore. You know what I mean? Like
Oh.
that was something that people were saying for like the first 20 years of my career. The last 10, maybe 5, that's just not that happening anymore. Because you know, you work 5 nights a week, 5 times a week is not gonna be your bills, you know what I mean? So
But like all the rest, let's just take Meisner. All the restaurants there. Now, there's a restaurant there, Max's Grill, that I used to dine at all the time. And I thought those guys all made good money. So you could see turnover. I've never seen him or her here before, so they're new. And I also know that to start there, you had to start off with lunch. You could not start at dinner. So lunch, you make less money at lunch.
yeah, everything costs less.
Price is
Yeah.
lower on the menus at lunchtime.
Everything costs less, and your window is smaller.
But it still costs them the same amount of money that food.
But also,
No, it's so
okay, so
you're
that,
saying their markup is
most
not as big?
most places have a lunch menu where it costs less money. It's a different menu that you get when you sit down. There'll be different items, or sometimes even the same item that's marked down. Also, your window's small. The reason that servers, I've said several times, like servers work light hours compared to everybody else. Like 3 hours a week, I'm starting to be like, woo, that's because
you just come in for your shift only,
right,
come in and then leave when your shift's over.
When you're a tipped employee, not like me, when you're a tipped employee, to earn that tip credit, your employer has to make sure that 80% of your time is spent dealing with guests. They can't make you mop floors. They can't make you wash dishes and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that was sad.
And also, people only want to eat at certain times of the day. Like, it's so hard to get people to eat before 6. It's so hard. So, like, we can bring a bunch of people, servers in at 5 or, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
can't set the restaurants good. Maybe they come in at 4. And then, like, after 8, you mainly get stragglers unless you're kind of a real, like, nightlife kind of place. So, like, there's only a certain amount of window of opportunity to capture diners and smaller on lunch.
I didn't think of it that way. How we doing?
Oh, we have plenty of time.
3 minutes.
Well, yeah, 3 minutes. It went fast.
What a great idea. This was Sophia's idea. In 12 years, I've never done a show like this before.
It's
We've had
different.
chefs on.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be different just to hear the other side. And Bo, I'm sure you have a couple more funny stories or some mean stories. Like,
Once again, I don't like once again, it's also part of the
what
fact
do
that
you
I
hate
don't
about diners? What is your pet peeve about diners? Your one pet peeve.
all I've got are a bunch of like little things that I could say, do these things to make your guests happy. I mean, like, obviously, don't be rude, don't be sexist,
Thank
don't be
you.
racist.
Yeah.
Don't start talking about violence because your server's black. You know what I mean? Like,
It's not
but
really,
stuff like that's not bad it used to be. But like, stuff like that where it's like, just be a good person in general. But some things that all servers secretly hate, because they don't hate you for it, they just hate it. Number one is coffee service. Coffee service is the worst.
Oh, really?
It is the worst.
Why?
Coffee service, you got to go someplace where there's hot water. So that's always going to be a particular place that the building design would set up for. We got to go get, you got to have to go to a fridge to get your cream. We've got several different components you need to put together to make this coffee service happen. And since the rise of Starbucks, coffee is now this big, like, everything's espresso or cappuccino or whatever. So if I've got a table that's got 5 people and they want 5 cappuccinos, I'm out of my section for 5 minutes. I don't like to let 2 minutes go by that my guests are going to see me unless I'm doing something that's very, very crucial. I'm out of my section for 5 minutes, all right, to make those 5 coffees. And the whole time I'm back there stressing because, like, I've got other tables that might need things like right this very instant. But this coffee's got to go out hot.
Yeah.
So even if I'm willing to make you wait, that can't stop in the middle. So coffee service is it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
What about these food companies that deliver?
We have 1
Huh?
minute.
Okay. Well, there's that question. It's going to have to.
We might have to have
Yeah,
a
we'll
little
do that.
bit.
Yeah, hope that isn't something that's going to get you fired.
One great show. If you missed any of that show, you can go to iHeart. You can go to YouTube. All under Eat and Critique. You can watch the show again. Don't forget Thursday, 5 o'clock.
And our
Mega
website,
Train.
www.eatandcritiquetvshow.com, and please subscribe to our YouTube. Thank you and good night. We'll see you next Monday. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, LeBeau.
Yes.
Thanks, Rebel.
You've been listening to the Eat and Critique Show with your hosts, award-winning restaurant critics Steve-O and Sophia, brought to you by Incontro Italian Cuisine and Steakhouse, located in Coral Springs on the Walk. Be sure to join us again next week as Steve-O and Sophia interview top local restaurant owners and chefs. Steve-O and Sophia are known for their pure honesty when it comes to reviewing local restaurants. See you next week.